Illuminatus! What? Here I am. Welcome everybody to the Leo Zagami Show for our own weekly encounter. I know I'm a little bit late, guys, but we had the Italian show. Unfortunately, they are still not changing to the legal, how you say, legal hour, legal time over there. So we have some problems with that, and at least until tomorrow, I think, when they will be also changing their own time. One of the other, I mean, there was a promise by a certain Donald J. Trump about not changing the time any longer, about maintaining all year around the same time. And instead, that was another promise made and not kept. What can you do, guys? What can you do? Welcome to the Leo Zagami Show, and thank you to our sponsor, Margot Rozzata Minta. Thank you, Margot Rozzata. Daniel Estes. Thank you, Daniel Estes. And Crystal Bate. Thank you so much. And we like to thank our sponsors with an applause. It's a lo-fi vintage applause, but we like it. And so here we go with the applause for our sponsors who make the show possible, as well as the people who, of course, have purchased my book, The Rise and Fall of a Frankist Monster, as well as all the other books of the Confessions of an Illuminati series. And for those who like to cook, we also have the Zagami Family Cookbook. And we also have the female take on the Illuminati with the Confessions of an Illuminati Princess, Volume 1 and 2, which I highly suggest you get. Here are the applauses for our sponsors. Thank you so much to those people who believe in us, to our sponsors. You can help us through GoFundMe or through Cash App. You can find the Cash App handle at leozagami.com, together with our latest articles, including this article, which is based on the subjects we will be discussing today: the real meaning of Buba and the ultimate secret of the Sabbatian Frankist cult behind Trump and Chabad, the Lubavitch. It's important, guys, to discuss all this because a few days ago I suddenly saw Tucker Carlson was being attacked because he said that the present war in Iran somehow was also being made because of this Chabad Lubavitch. So who are these people? What is Chabad Lubavitch and what it represents? It's very important to understand that officially Chabad Lubavitch is an Orthodox organization. But in reality, when you go and check out the people who follow Chabad Lubavitch, and I have my own experiences, so this is also from a direct experience, they are instead, many of the followers of this Hasidic movement are very much progressive, just as much as the so-called Reformed Jews. So they are not that orthodox. In any case, Sabbatian influences have been present on the Hasidic movements. And for that reason, there is very few people in the academic world who want to discuss the Sabbatian Frankist influences on today's Jewish society and the Jewish community, on also on the state of Israel, which, like my late friend Barry Kamish used to say, is a Sabbatian Frankist state. But let's understand who what is this Chabad Lubavitch, and then we can at that point understand a little bit better the connections with the Sabbatian Frankist. Remember that there is also another article that I highly suggest you go and read, another article I published a few days ago, where Dugin finally exposes the Sabbatian Frankists as the essence of Zionism, confirming everything that I wrote in my book on Jeffrey Epstein. Alexander Dugin, often being called the Rasputin of Vladimir Putin, was also posting this on X, saying that when Trump accused Tucker of having lost his way as a MAGA supporter, he actually said quite the opposite. When Trump accused Tucker of being a traitor, he said the traitor is you. Tucker is the real American hero. You are pathetic. Now, this might seem obvious for a supporter of the Russian Federation, but Alexander Dugin is not simply a supporter of the Russian Federation. He means much more. His own daughter was killed by the Ukrainian intelligence, and Alexander Dugin has been a cultural icon of the former Soviet Union since the 1990s, when the Russian Federation started this post-Soviet Union reality. Alexander Dugin now portrays President Trump as having lost his way and aligning with the neocon establishment. But Alexander Dugin is also making a specific accusation against Donald J. Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who, as we know, has always been connected with the Chabad Lubavitch movement. So this latest war with Iran, for Alexander Dugin, as well as Tucker Carlson, has the involvement, of course, of Jared Kushner. But contrary to Tucker Carlson, who tends to still, condemn Chabad Lubavitch without digging deep, Dugin instead brings out the Sabbatians, the Sabbatian Frankists, because he says Sabbatianism was rejected, I'm quoting Alexander Dugin, by Orthodox Judaism, but it did not disappear completely and continued to spread, especially among Ashkenazi Jews, just like I explained in my book. The Chabad Lubavitch movement is now a very influential movement. It's probably the most influential Orthodox Jewish movement in the world. That's why they are received in the White House by Donald J. Trump, who prays with them. Donald J. Trump, who with his son-in-law is very much also into the Messiah of the Chabad Lubavitch movement, a controversial Messiah, because, of course, people who are not part of the Chabad Lubavitch movement, and not everybody in the Chabad Lubavitch movement, accept this guy as the Messiah. But we will talk about him in a moment. This is Trump with the Chabad Lubavitch rabbis in the Oval Office.
When I ordered it, I said it's got to be fit for President Trump, and he has to like it. So they sent me a photo, and they said,
it's beautiful.
And it's inscribed to you, and it also says two passages, one from the Bible, which says that it should be righteousness before God by you. The other one that says we make a living by what we earn, we make a life by what we give. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we represent the ethos of not only...
It's a great line, isn't it? Put it in the speech.
And it represents the ethos of education and sharing, which is in that proclamation you issued. And when I speak about education and sharing, in the words of our Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Schneerson, at whose resting place you prayed.
Ecco, that's it. at this resting place you prayed. When Donald J. Trump won the first time, it was actually his son-in-law and his daughter who went to this to his resting place. We're talking here about the false messiah of the Chabad Lubavitch movement. Jared Kushner, the son-in-law of Donald Trump, who is also, as you know, a former presidential advisor, but is also in charge of all the policies in the Middle East still to this day. Jared Kushner has been involved. His connection goes back to his studies at Harvard, where he attended the local Chabad. And Rabbi Hirshi Zarki described Kushner as a devoted student and supporter, including participation in services and Shabbat dinners, financial donations. The Kushner Foundation has donated hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions, to various Shabbat institutions in the USA and Israel over the years. Even in support of Chabad Lubavitch in the Arab Emirates, in November 2024, Jared Kushner and Ivanka pledged $1 million to the Chabad of the United Arab Emirates. But there is a lot of sinister things that connects Jared Kushner family, which describes itself as modern Orthodox. What is modern Orthodox, if not Reform Judaism under another, under disguise? He has a strong Chabad affinity. He even resides near a Chabad center during the Trump administration in Washington, D.C. He has brought a place next, basically, to the Chabad Center in Washington, D.C. But his own address in New York is also being the matter of a lot of speculation amongst Christians because of the number. Let's not forget that for the Sabbatian Frankists, the number 666 has a very strong connection with Shabbatai Zevi. It was in the year 1666 that the Sultan forced Shabbatai Zevi to renounce to Judaism in favor of Islam, and that was the birth of the crypto-Sabbatian Jewish movement known as the Dommeh in the Ottoman Empire. Later on, of course, Jacob Frank will then expand what we now call the Sabbatian Frankists in the Christian world. But the fact that Jared Kushner has this 41-story tower in Midtown Manhattan that was supposed to be the crown jewel of the Kushner Company's real estate empire, and that the Kushners brought in 2007 for $1.8 billion. The most expensive real estate in New York's history. This is quite incredible. But the address, guys, it's for new building 660. No, but instead, it's like now, however, the bill is fast approaching. The Kushner dream of turning 666 Fifth Avenue into an opulent tower designed by the late architects highly dependent on their finding a partner soon, blah, blah, blah. But I repeat, the address is very significant, very symbolic. But then there is also this reference that we just saw. When, listen carefully.
Rabbi Menachem Schneerson, that in the resting place you prayed.
That in the resting place you prayed. Yes, the false messiah of the Chabad Lubavitch movement, known as Menachem Mendel Scherson. Of course, my pronunciation might not be the correct one. Died in 1994. He is the seventh Lubavitcher Rebbe, which is a major figure in the movement. Is the master in the movement, the seventh master of this movement, and is also the one connected to the Messianist faction that proclaimed him the Messiah, which is a proclamation that led to controversy even amongst the Chabad Lubavitch, amongst the Shabbatniks, as some of the other Orthodox call them. Let me show the moment in which Donald J. Trump went to visit the Chabad Messiah, the false Messiah, during his recent presidential campaign.
Republican presidential nominee and former President Donald Trump made a personal prayer visit on Monday to the Ohel, the resting place of Rabbi Menachem M. Schneerson, the former leader of the Chabad movement. Trump was joined by the parents and brother of Eden Alexander, a hostage currently held by terrorists in Gaza, as well as Auschwitz survivor Jerry Wartsky and 2 Jewish college students who have faced anti-Semitism on campus. Upon entering the Rebbe's tent, Trump made a donation to the movement. Wearing a kippah, Trump prayed during the visit. His daughter Ivanka and son-in-law Jared Kushner have paid regular private visits to the Ohel before both of his presidential elections.
Okay, so let's give a brief history of this Hasidic group known as Chabad Lubavitch, because they've been around for a while, the Chabad Lubavitch movement, but it's important also to understand that they always come from the same milieu of Ashkenazi Jews who unfortunately was subject to the Sabbatian Frankist heresy. And the Sabbatian Frankist heresy was very influential, was extremely influential. Some, of course, of some Orthodox Jews didn't get affected at all. Some others did get affected. And it's very important to understand who we have in front of us today, because Sabbatianism it's something almost like a virus that influence all the various synagogues of the 19th century. Shabbatai Zevi, and this is a citation given by somebody who is very respected, who has a great following to this day, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, was born in 1772, died at a rather young age in 1810. But he has still to this day a great following. And this great following within Orthodox Judaism tends to dislike Chabad Lubavitch and what they represent, because they say that unfortunately the Sabbatian Frankists have managed to influence this major Hasidic movement within Orthodox Judaism that was founded in the late 18th century by Rabbi Shenur Zalman of Liadi, which promotes Jewish education, observance, and all the rest, globally operating with thousands of centers known as Chabad houses, run by their emissaries known as the Shluchim. Sorry to my Jewish friends, if I don't pronounce always the Hebrew in the correct way. But Chabad stands for Chokmah, which also in the Kabbalistic tradition means wisdom. And then you have Bina, which is comprehension, and Dat, which is knowledge. They emphasize the understanding of divine thought through this bringing Judaism to every person, regardless of the background or current level of observance. The movement, though, the fact that the movement initially rejected this calls, for messianism, to embrace a new Messiah, because the moment in which you embrace a new Messiah, inevitably you will immediately draw comparisons with what happened with Shabbatai Zevi. Now, so the group, the Chabad group, which Trump is connected to through Jared Kushner, but also through his old friends in B'nai Brit, because even the people which he connected through Bnai Brit, many of them are connected to Chabad Lubavitch and their false messiah. A false messiah who died a long time ago, but as you see, they are still revering him like he died yesterday. I mean, and now there is even members of Chabad Lubavitch who claim that Trump is the Messiah.
Non-Jewish Messiah was chosen to be of service to the Jewish people and the Jewish Messiah. President Trump's right ear was grazed in a symbolic gesture of Exodus 21:6, where the Torah states that a servant who wants to remain with his master needs to have his right ear pierced. Trump was designated as God's servant and anointed one, just like Cyrus the Great almost 2,400 years ago. We have clarified in several videos that the absolute deadline for the redemption is by the end of the Jewish year 5787, which corresponds to October 2nd, 2027, 1,167 days from today. Thus, the redemption will surely occur during Donald Trump's tenure. And I have good reason to believe Donald Trump was chosen to be the one to redeem the sins of Esav through offering his assistance in rebuilding the Holy Temple on the Temple Mount and establishing the Jewish kingdom over all of mankind in Jerusalem. Perhaps it is no accident that the numeric value of Donald Trump in Hebrew is the same as Messiah, son of David, Mashiach ben David.
Whoa. Whoa. Well, Tucker Carlson actually seems to have made then the right accusation, if that's what the people in the Chabad Lubavitch movement claim.
So how exactly did the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, a military that the U.S. taxpayer pays for, that lots of wealthy Americans send money to friends of the IDF, how did all these guys wind up wearing patches suggesting the point of this war was the destruction of one of the holiest places in Islam and the rebuilding of a temple that is totally anathema to Christianity? Like, how did this happen? Well, there are a lot of ways it happened. The main way it happened is because no one in the United States noticed, because it's such a secular place. And as noted, we have eyes but can't see and ears and can't hear. But this has been going on a long time in public through, in part, the efforts of a group called Chabad, Chabad. And you may know people who give money to Chabad or run to Chabad, super nice people, engaged in all kinds of charitable activities, drug rehab. There's a lot about Chabad that's really good. But what is Chabad exactly? Well, Chabad, you can look it up, is a very old organization, about 250 years old. And it's a branch of Hasidic Judaism. It's an organization that was overseen for many years by a guy called Rabbi Menachem Schneerson, who was famously in Brooklyn, considered the Messiah by some of his followers, who was a friend of presidents, or certainly someone presidents visited. He was a very powerful man in the Orthodox and the Hasidic community. And he was the overseer of Chabad, which predated him and outlasted him, but he was its most visible ambassador. And Chabad has been pushing in a pretty subtle way, unless you look carefully, for the reconstruction of the Third Temple. And it seems like, from the reading we did recently, that those patches actually came from Chabad. Well, in any case, Chabad is pushing for the building of the Third Temple.
Now, immediately everybody accused Tucker Carlson of being anti-Semitic. He's been, of course, cursed by Trump, and the people within Trump's milieu are saying he's no longer representing in any way the MAGA movement. Then Tucker Carlson, of course, is being accused of following some kind of absurd conspiracy. Here it is. Oh, wow. It's an absurd conspiracy. That was my thought when I heard that Tucker Carlson, in a recent podcast episode, has directed his ire over the Iran war at none other than the Chabad movement, one of the largest Jewish organizations in the world. The reason, according to Carlson, it all stems from a small fabric patch that some members of the Israeli Defense Forces have chosen to wear on their Whoop. Here we had a little technical problem, guys. Okay. But instead, you saw yourself that there is actually confirmation from a member of Chabad Lubavitch of their intentions to rebuild the Fair Temple, and on top of that, in connection with Trump, as a sort of non-Jewish Messiah.
The current non-Jewish Messiah was chosen to be of service to the Jewish people.
So, I mean, and he even gives a number, 424.
424. However, Donald Trump is mistaken if he thinks he was chosen to make America great again. He will no doubt do a lot of good things to strengthen our economy, protect our borders, and allow religious freedom to flourish. But America will never become a great country on its own, because Esav's days are numbered. All our elite institutions and centers of power and influence are rotten through and through. The majority of Americans under 30 who are college educated and who are the future leaders of America support the vicious monsters of Hamas rather than the holy and courageous soldiers of the IDF. No human being, even Donald Trump, can reverse this. No. The greatness of America does not lie in its own success. America will be great when the Messiah comes. And the leader of this country, on behalf of all the good people in this country, will humbly present himself to the Jewish Messiah and ask him to accept the United States of America into a new alliance of countries who accept the leadership of the Messiah. A new United Nations will replace the current cesspool that goes by that fraudulent name. A real United Nations, united to serve God, led by the Messiah and based in Jerusalem. And my feeling is that the United States under President Trump will be the first nation to join.
That's a little bit confusing, because their Messiah, like I stated a moment ago, seems to have died in the 90s. Is he going to resurrect? It's a little bit of a paradox, let's say, the Chabad paradox. This Hasidic group that is named after a town in Russia. It's now the most influential, of course, group within Hasidism, and it's an acronym that mixes these elements of human and divine intelligence, chokmah, wisdom, being, understanding, and that knowledge. While mainstream Orthodox Judaism has seen extraordinary growth through the Baal Teshuvah movements of returners to religious observance, the foundations were laid by Chabad all along. But there is a problem here. The fact that these movements that claim they are, conservative, they are no better than the ones who are also politically called the labor Zionists. I explain in my book, The Rise and Fall of Frankist Monster, that you have basically people like the founder of the Zionist revisionist movement, this guy here, but he's no better than this other guy, Abraham Geiger, who is considered one of the founding members of Reform Judaism, which is the other side, also the one that then will manifest into labor Zionism later on. So, I mean, these two factions anyway, old factions of Zionism, have been created by the Sabbatian Frankists, so to oppose each other into the using the divide and conquer method. But going back to the Rebbe, the Messiah, that has created also a lot of scandal, because the Chabad Messianism, the Messianism in Hasidic Judaism, inevitably brings us to talk again about the Sabbatian Frankists, who hid themselves within Orthodox Judaism to then re-emerge. I mean, of course, they hid themselves first with the Shabbatian movement in the Ottoman Empire with the Dommeh within Islam. Then they emerged with Jacob Frank within the Catholic and then the Protestant world in Christianity. But those who didn't convert and wanted to stay within Judaism, they became also influenced by the Sabbatians. Going back to Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, he said these words of Shabbatai Zevi, and I'm quoting Rabbi Nachman. Shabbatai Zevi, cursed be his name, led astray a number of the greatest men of the generation and outstanding scholars. Let me show you here the citation. And but when a tzaddik, righteous man, sweetens their words, he transforms their sayings back into Torah. Now, because of this sweetening words, even Nachum of Breslov, Rabbi Nachman, was accused of being influenced by Shabbatai Zevi. The ones who, of course, like to accuse everybody else, but then in return they are the, so it creates a lot of confusion also within Judaism. Here we have Rabbi Yoel the Maggid of Nemirov, who says the best said that Shabbatai Zevi had a spark of holiness in him, but that Satan caught him in his snare. This is very important. Then we have there exists a mass of evidence on the development of Sabbatianism between 1700 and 1760. This is, of course, Gershon Scholem, one of the biggest historians on the subject. Gershon Scholem on the spread of Sabbatianism well into a period of the Baal Shem Tov. We are talking here about the very roots of Orthodox Judaism. In any case, Orthodox Judaism, like Rabbi Antelman said, shouldn't even exist because there is only one kind of Judaism. And I repeated that citation here in my book. You shouldn't have, today here in America, we have 80% of people following so-called Reform Judaism. What is Reform Judaism? But what is also the Chabad Lubavitch movement? And what is any other movement connected to Judaism? When the Mosaic laws are very clear and they are the same for everybody, from everybody. The moment in which Moses comes down from the mountain, though the first time, who does he find? He finds the worshippers of the golden calf. And those are the Erev Rab, who predate the heresy of the Sabbatian Frankists by many thousands of years, but still very important. Now, there was a guy who fought very much these heresies, especially the Sabbatian Frankist when it emerged, and he even wrote an important book about it. But let's stay within the debate regarding the alleged influence of the Chabad Lubavitch movement on Donald J. Trump's administration geopolitics for the moment, especially as this conflict in Iran and the Middle East is getting worse and worse every day. We are all suffering, and we will all be suffering, because not only we have to pay more for our gas when we go and simply to the gas station and fill up our car. Today we see that there is no golden age. But the worst is about to come, is about to manifest, because the Strait of Hormuz is also the passage for the fertilizers. The fertilizers were already diminishing after the war in Ukraine, and major exporter of the fertilizer is Russia, as well as Ukraine. And you can imagine the problems that we had since the beginning of the intensifying, let's say, because the conflict already started after 2014. Now the fertilizers, the remaining fertilizers that were passing through the Strait of Hormuz no longer can pass there. You can't even pass through the Red Sea, because you have the Houthi are proxy militias of Iran, so both are closed. That means, guys, that we are in front of a disaster. A disaster is not about simply the gas prices. Here is about the production of our food. the actual fertilizers guarantee the massive production of our food. We don't need fertilizers if we, of course, stick to the traditional methods. But unfortunately, in this world of ours, a good chunk of the world population that lives in the cities and everything that comes from the supermarkets, unfortunately, relies on those fertilizers. So I understand that some people say, I don't care about, the fertilizers because they're not even natural. But the problem is that we're going to see some great famine on the horizon because of what is happening, aside from, of course, all the rest. But going back to the Kushner family, Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump are longtime supporters of the Chabad Lubavitch movement. The Kushners, like we said, have donated hundreds of thousands of dollars, even millions, to this institution through the years. Kushner has been a key figure in the decision to moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, which also ignited a lot of controversy, withdrawing also from the Iranian deal and signing the Abraham Accords. Trump visited the tomb of Rabbi Menachem Mendel Sherzon, the Hoel, to pray upon it. Why Trump is praying upon the tomb of a false Messiah? Question. Why? And then we have, of course, the father of Jared Kushner, who has become the ambassador, the American ambassador in France. And when he got this influential position, the first thing he did was to have a rabbi from the Chabad Lubavitch movement doing this ritual for him.
Now, when you are going now to Paris, if you know the situation between Israel and France, you are the right person in the right place for the Jewish people. Baruch Hashem. It's great that the President of the United States, Mr. Donald Trump, sent an ambassador Jewish to that place. And Be'ezrat Hashem, you will talk strong. You, Baruch Hashem, you are representative of the biggest nation in the world, the strongest. And Be'ezrat Hashem, you will support Am Israel. I didn't think about that when I spoke to you at that time, but I'm so happy. Baruch Hashem, Be'ezrat Hashem, I will bless you in Hebrew, יהי רצון, שבכל אשר תפנה, תשכיל ותצליח. תזכה שהקדוש ברוך הוא ייתן אותך לחן ולחסד בעיני כל רואיך. בריאות טובה, אריכות ימים ושנים, אתה ורעייתך תמיד, אמן כן יהי רצון.
Now, it's important to state what I also stated in The Rise and Fall of Frankie's Monster, when I say that we shouldn't fall into the trap of anti-Semitism. There is some great people within the Orthodox Jewish community. Hasidic Jews are not all evil, but unfortunately what happened is that they got influence. A large chunk of them got influenced by the Sabbatian Frankist heresy. And so there were conflicts initially within the Jewish community who was trying to fight the Sabbatian movement. And like Sholem said, no chapter in the history of the Jewish people during the last several hundred years has been as shrouded in mystery as that of the Sabbatian movement. The false Messiah, Shabbatai Zevi, has created a lot of problems for the Jews. But they don't want to discuss it. They don't want to make it public. This is a weak spot for a lot of rabbinical schools that inevitably have links with Sabbatian Frankism. In this passage it says, but it is well known what happened in this regard in the time of the false Messiah Shabbatai Zevi. and we still have not escaped him and his legacy. This is Rabbi Menashe ben Yosef of Hila. Rabbi Menashe of Hila, a student of Vilna Gaon, on the apparent interest in Sabbatianism expressed by some of the other students of the Vilna Gaon. Now, there was a book that was published when the Sabbatian heresy started to spread. It's called the Sefer Shimus. Sefer Shimush was published in 1758, so after the birth of Jacob Frank, who then claimed to be the reincarnation of Shabbatai Zevi, and of course also his follow-up Baruch Russo. The Sefer Shimush is not very well known, but is a key anti-Sabbatian polemic that documents the transformation of Sabbatianism from 17th century Messianic movement, because initially it was a Messianic movement, but then it became secret, an heretical secret sect after 1666. That's why the number 666 is so important. It serves as a primary source, this book, for understanding the so-called open secret of Sabbatianism, providing, for instance, a description also of the conflict that the Rabbi Jacob Hamden, who is the author, was involved in exposing Rabbi Eberschutz, who was, and this is, of course, a topic which I touched in my book. Let me show here for those who are interested in this. Jacob Hamden, also known as the Yavetz, born in 1697, died in 1776. Imagine that. What a year, huh? Year in which also the Illuminati were founded. And the Illuminati then became connected through the Asiatic Brethren also to the Sabbatian movement. It says here, was a leading German rabbi and Talmudist who championed traditional Judaism in the face of the growing influence of the Sabbatian movement. He was widely acclaimed for his extensive knowledge. Hamden was the son of Akan Tizi Ashkenazi, and this guy apparently was also somebody who was a resolute opponent of the followers of the self-proclaimed Messiah Shabbatai Zevi. Both of them were Ashkenazi, so it's not about being Ashkenazi, and it's not because you are Ashkenazi you are inherently evil. There were people within the Ashkenazi community who fought this heresy. The problem is that after having fought this heresy, for some reason, when the heresy got too widespread and for them too difficult to control, then at that point they gave up on even talking about it. And that is a big problem. Now, I have discussed these topics for a long time, as you know. I published a book, but The Rise and Fall of a Frankist Monster. And now there is, like I stated in the article dedicated to Alexander Dugin, a guy who he references to, who seemed to say exactly the same things which I published in my book that came out at the end of October of last year. And this guy is basically citing me without referencing to me, which is something that we could expect from a Chinese individual. Yes, there is a Chinese individual, a professor, who is now discussing all this, and who, like I explained in my article, Alexander Dugin refers to him, not to me. Yan Xu-Kyun, who is a professor, an intellectual, very well-known figure now at the moment on the internet. Here he is. This guy is the only guy at the moment in the academic world which is basically picking up on every single thing I have written in my book, including the link to the Rothschilds and the Sabbatian Frankists with Jeffrey Epstein, a topic which, as you know, I have discussed. So when I saw this video that came out literally 1 week ago, I was like, wow.
What is the overlap between Frankists, the Rothschilds, and Judaism?
Okay. All right. So there's competing interpretations, okay? So the Rothschilds are Frankists, okay? We know that. The Rothschild believe in the Frankists, okay?
Wow, who told you that? Leo Zagami? Maybe you should cite Leo Zagami, you know. This guy is a Chinese academic, unbelievable. Yang Kuxin, Chinese-Canadian YouTuber, educator, and writer. He has been an English teacher at the Montshot Academy High School in Beijing. So you can only become an English teacher at this school in Beijing if you are in with the Chinese Communist Party. Then it says on his YouTube channel, he has this predictive history where he styles himself as Professor Yang and promotes conspiracy theory that the world is controlled by the Illuminati, Freemasons, and Jesuits. Ooh, wow.
As well as the Epsteins, okay? So that's overlap. So you look at Jeffrey Epstein and the Rothschild. Why were they close? Because they're all part of the Frankist movement, okay? So there are two interpretations of Frankism. The first interpretation, which is the mainstream interpretation, is that Frankism is a heresy, okay? Because what Frankism argues is justification by sin, all right? And the idea is that this world that we live in is a fake world, right? And this fake world is run by evil people, Satan, who impose ideas that make no sense. For example, the idea of sin, right? So for example, you shouldn't eat pork and you can't work on Saturdays, it's Sabbath, right? Wait a minute here. That makes no sense whatsoever. Aren't we, as divine beings who are connected to God, aren't we able to reason for ourselves what is right and what is not right? And how do you prove your faith then? You prove your faith by rejecting the idea of sin and putting your total faith in God. And you do that by breaking taboos, right? Including incest. So when you commit an act of incest, what you're doing is you are literally showing that your faith in God is stronger than the conventions of man, right? So Jacob Frank has this great saying where what I teach you, this is a thing that 10,000 men can't lift, right? This oppresses 10,000 men. But this one thing you can live with a finger, okay? It's light as a feather. It's the idea of taboo and sin, okay? We've been oppressed by the idea of morality, by the idea of sin, by the idea of taboos. And once you free your mind, then you're capable of anything. You're capable of divinity, okay? So that's the main teaching of Jacob Frank. And Jacob Frank is one of the founders of the Illuminati, along with Mayer Rothschild, okay? So Rothschild is a Frankist family. The Frankists are considered a heresy of the Jewish faith. But then there's another interpretation, which is that the Frankism is just a natural extension of the Jewish faith, because the Jewish faith is one based on superiority, racial superiority, right? So like the Jews are just a inherently superior people to everyone else, the Goyim, because they are God's chosen people, and therefore they should be allowed to do whatever they want to demonstrate that they're superior, right? Including breaking taboos. So there are two interpretations. The mainstream interpretation by the rabbis is they're heresy. Let's never talk about them because they're evil. The other interpretation is they're just a natural evolution or the logical conclusion of the Jewish faith.
Okay, perfect. So this Professor Yang, suddenly is present even on Piers Morgan's show with his theories. Piers Morgan, who obviously ignores Leo Zagami, but loves to have this Chinese professor. Guys, as long as you are a professor in this day and age, as you are an academic, a credible source of information suddenly. But I mean, compared to what I've been writing in my books and saying on my shows, this guy is saying absolutely nothing. But let's go to this passage in a recent episode of the Piers Morgan Uncensored, in which he says the following.
As the father of 4 daughters.
And this is, of course, a show that, as you can imagine, was dedicated to the war in Iran. And Piers Morgan invites, of course, this guy. And let's see what he says, especially in this passage here. I have a passage here which I find particularly revealing of this professor. Let me see here. Guys, a second. Let me find it for you. Okay. Here he is. Okay. Welcome to the Leo Zagami Show. In the meantime, I want to thank my sponsors for today, Marco Rosada Minta, Daniel Estes, Crystal Bare, and those who have, of course, purchased my books.
What's happening now in terms of the tactics that Iran are deploying, including the threats to desalination, but also targeting, obviously, targeted hotels and airports and so on, going to the heart of what the states there would like to see as the future of their economy, which is tourism, sport, entertainment, clearly designed to scare people away from that. Is this now representing an existential threat, do you think?
Let me put it exactly at the precise moment I want you to dig into.
Right. At the heart and the head of the American economy is the President of the United States. You've argued that Trump is not the most powerful person in America, and you've inferred that actually the real power base is Israel. Explain that.
Right. So I actually don't say the real power base is Israel. What I say is that the real power base are a collection of secret societies that have an eschatological view of this war. And these secret societies include the Freemasons, which are now called the Rosicrucians and the Knights Templars. They include Jewish organizations called the Sabbatian Frankists.
Wow, bingo. This guy should study a little bit more, though, my books, and maybe he can get facts even more correct. Can you imagine? Leo Zagami is being copied by the Chinese. There is a Leo Zagami made in China version. These Chinese guys, we have to admit, they are able of copying anything and everything. It's like when they stole the compass and square from Freemasonry here in the West to make their own form of Chinese Freemasonry, inserting it on a secret society that existed from ancient times, and just say, okay, this is part of our tradition, compass and square. Wow.
Who are embedded in religious movements called Chabad Lubavitch. And then you have the Jesuits.
Chabad Lubavitch. Oh, wow. He mentioned Chabad Lubavitch. Wow. Ooh.
You have a collection of secret societies. And they believe that a war in the Middle East would start a process that would culminate in the end times and the return of Jesus, the arrival of the Jewish Messiah, the building of a one world government. They have different eschatologies, but a lot of their time frames do align. So where they converge is that there has to be a war in the Middle East to kick things off. This war in the Middle East will lead to the defeat of the American Empire, and this will lead to the culmination of the Greater Israel Project, where Israel is able to control the Middle East from the Nile to the Euphrates. Once the Greater Israel Project is in place, it will transform into the Pax Judaica, which is an AI surveillance state.
AI surveillance state, cyber Satan. Guys, soon I'm gonna have to go and teach at the Beijing universities, the universities in Beijing. At least maybe I will have a proper audience in China rather than here in America, where Leo Zagami is completely ignored. They seem to at least be copying me in China. What can you do? But anyway, a lot of people are reading my books. And we have now a big discussion around the presence or not of Peter Thiel in Rome tomorrow. He's supposed to give a series of lectures about the Antichrist. Yes, once again, he's giving a series of lectures about, but this time he wants to do them in the backyard of the Vatican. And it seems that even Pope Leo doesn't want to have that happening, and so he was initially supposed to give this lecture starting tomorrow in a specific place, the Pontifical University of Tommaso Aquinas, but now it seems that maybe they're going to have to change around the situation, because the Pope does, Peter Thiel has been critical of the Pope. And so now the Pope is taking revenge by not letting him have his talks, his speeches, his conferences in this university that belongs to the Vatican. But who knows? There is a lot of controversy at the moment. Even a member of the Italian parliament has talked about it, wanting to know from Prime Minister Meloni a little bit more about what Peter Thiel is doing. If you want to, of course, know more about this controversy, go and check my latest article on leozagami.com. Peter Thiel's Antichrist lectures in the backyard of the Vatican are causing controversy in Rome, guys. It's a paradox that Peter Thiel, a guy who is literally aiding and abetting the future Antichrist and cyber Satan with Palantir, is talking about the Antichrist. Think about it. He's also, of course, very close to Donald J. Trump. This is what happens in the Italian parliament when they were trying to ask the Prime Minister about Peter Thiel's visit.
Grazie Presidente, onorevoli colleghi, non posso rivolgermi al rappresentante del governo perché non...
So here we are, this is the Italian Parliament, a member of the Democratic Party of Italy is trying to ask informations on this visit of Peter Thiel.
La Presidente del Consiglio Meloni, ma a nostro avviso tutti i ministri interessati, il Ministro degli Affari Esteri e la Cooperazione Internazionale, il Ministro della Difesa.
In this crucial moment, he says, for the history of Italy and the world, with what is happening in the Middle East, Palantir, of course, is involved in both the war in Iran as well as the one in Ukraine. We have Peter Thiel, who wants to have a say also in the Vatican. He thinks that the Vatican is a key place for the future of the AI development, something that Leo Zagami has been discussing with many books, starting from volume 6.66, Confessions of Illuminati 6.66, volume 7, volume 9, on the rise of cyber Satan. But Peter Thiel has criticized Pope Leo, and so now there is a lot of controversy going on. I suggest you go and check the latest article on leozagami.com. But let's go back to the subject of today, because we have also the real meaning of Buba in my latest article. You remember Buba, when this mail came out, it was pretty funny. Now everybody said, maybe it's Bill Clinton. When Mark Epstein, the brother of Jeffrey Epstein, wrote, ask him if Putin has the photos of Trump blowing Buba. But Buba is also a key character of the Sabbatian Frankists. So I wanted to explain that in my latest article. Buba is not simply the nickname of Bill Clinton. Buba is part of Frank's occult antinomian teachings. It represents the big brother. Yeah, the big brother. Just like Peter Thiel, who happens to be born in Frankfurt, like I said, where, of course, his family was involved in Offenbach with Jacob Frank. So the links are pretty much there. Now, the big brother of the Sabbatian Frankists has also a big brother that observes them from another dimension. There is actually a secret society in that other dimension. And Buba is this figure that is associated with the Shekinah. I explained that the Shekinah in Epstein's cult was referred to Ghislaine Maxwell. Anyway, I also explain in this article that the Chinese intellectual Jin Qin, Professor Yang, is obviously referencing to the rise and fall of Frankist monster without citing their source. Well, this is obvious. And I also explained a little bit more about the Chabad, the Lubavitch movement, which, I mean, there is a lot of good people that belong to it. I'm sure there is a lot of people who follow Chabad Lubavitch who would be like absolutely disgusted by any connection with Shabbatai Zevi and his followers. But the truth is that in the Hasidic world, there has always been a link to the Sabbatian Frankists that has been denied by the academic world. It's like this spillover from Sabbatianism to Hasidism has occurred, but the academic religious literature within Judaism is intent in erasing any connection. So this minority that opposes Sabbatianism that I talked to you about, like Rabbi Emden and so on, they are a minority that then the Sabbatian movement has became an embarrassment to the Jewish community. And attempts were made to destroy some of the historic communal records on the order of the rabbis. This is not me who says it, it's Gershom Scholem. He wrote this in 1987. So the Sabbatian movement was simply driven further underground, where its literature and its rabbinic personalities continue to flourish and exert significant influence, like I explained in my book. In a sense, my book is trying to reconstruct the records that have been destroyed and to create a new record of this subversive Sabbatian activity that continue well into last century and this century. When you have Les Wexner working with Jeffrey Epstein, creating the mega group, the so-called Jewish Study Group, from as early as 1670, think about this, official rabbinic bans of excommunications were issued against the Sabbatians. The movement was formally outlawed. A year later, the authoritative rabbinic and communal Jewish bodies entitled the Ba'ad Arba Aratzot, Council of Four Lands, announced, and here I'm quoting them, a great Erem excommunication with sounding of the ram's horn. The criminals and reckless people belonging to the sect of Shabbatai Zevi, on pain of infamy, fines, jail, and even to deliver them to the justice of the Gentiles. So this meant passing them on even to the Inquisition and to the Christian authorities. The bans were read out aloud in all synagogues at the time. But this didn't stop the Sabbatians. They were expelled from every community, every province, but it didn't stop them. The emergence of a new form of Sabbatianism, then with Jacob Frank, after the crypto-Sabbatians of the Dome, created new tensions within the Jewish society that can only be described as the elephant in the room. These tensions was compounded by the inherent nature of Sabbatianism, which wasn't a political or social movement. Rather, it was a mystical outreach movement, and a fervent one at that. Sabbatian Frankists later, they were not passive and quiet followers, happy to keep themselves, isolated and minding their own business. Instead, they developed a sophisticated program of outreach activity for which they successfully managed to attract new adherents, and the movement expanded, even taking over people in the Chabad Lubavitch movement. How many of the past rebbes, past masters of the Chabad Lubavitch movement have really belonged to the Sabbatian Frankists is only a matter of speculation, but we judge them from what they have produced. And the methodology that they use was to appear always to be part of the mainstream Judaism, and then slowly introduce their theology to the unsuspecting recruits. The followers then felt part of an inner circle, still to this day, privileged. They know the secrets of redemption through sin. They were revealed the secrets, not the rest of the world. They always felt like an inner circle, like a Gnostic circle. The adherents have always been determined to remain clandestine, so they can spread the Sabbatian message and teachings without any influence, external influence or disturbance. Many of the widely read English language surveys of Jewish history suggest that after the conversion of Shabbatai Zevi to Islam in 1666, only a few followers continued to believe in Sabbatai's messianic mission. However, scholars of Sabbatianism have long known this is a misleading picture. Large number of secret Sabbatians permeated to this day the general Jewish population, even the rabbinic world. A significant number of Jews, especially rabbinic scholars, have remained fully committed to Shabbatai Zevi and Sabbatian theology through both the apostasy and the aspirations of their false messiahs, like the one followed by Donald J. Trump. In today's episode, I wanted to make you understand the potential of the Sabbatian influence in our own life. There has always been a great difficulty in differentiating a Sabbatian Kabbalist mystic from a mainstream Kabbalist. Before the 17th century, Jewish mysticism was largely elitist anyway, so it had that kind of inner circle attitude. Shabbatai Zevi, through his use and revision of classical Jewish mysticism, has arguably created the largest Jewish mystical and popular messianic movement in history. It was, and it is, I think, the most widespread and influential Jewish messianic movement since Christianity, even if it's, of course, an evil one, a very evil one. The Frankist movement continued what Shabbatai Zevi started. And it's also another challenge for researchers, because the influences that these people had in the Jewish society are very rarely acknowledged. It was difficult to even speak of a Hasidic movement and a sect operating within it, especially when it came down to the Sabbatian Frankists. This was known to the followers of Rabbi Nathan Adler of Frankfurt, for example, or other followers of Baal Shem Tov, who created the basic for the Hasidic movement as we know it. Often the mainstream rabbinic communities, authorities, simply regard all these groups as antinomian. And so in the end, here we are in the year 2026 with a very superficial understanding of the mess created by the Sabbatian Frankists. And of course, I am the only one who has written about the connection between the Sabbatian Frankists and Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. And now there is even a Chinese guy who's imitating me. Can you believe it? A Chinese guy. Incredible.
First is the United States will use ground troops. And this will mean that Donald Trump will institute a national draft. Okay? That's the first prediction. Second prediction is that Israel and the United States will not use tactical nuclear weapons in this war. Number three is that the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest site in the Islamic world, will be destroyed during this war. Okay, so last class, I explained my analysis and my reasoning for my first two predictions. Today, I'll explain my third prediction. So, but before we start, I just want to look at some videos, okay? So you understand some of the context, some of the players in this war. All right, so this is Senator Blumenthal of Connecticut, and he is one of the 100 members of the U.S. Senate. He's also one of the members of the Gang of Eight. Now,
this is Chinese. They're getting deep. These Chinese, yeah, in their expositions. Now that they have their master conspiracy theorists that gets invited even on the Piers Morgan Uncensored. I want to thank all the people who follow me, who continue to support me, even if, of course, I've been shadow banned, censored. The 17 channels have been removed from YouTube in the last few years. There has been all kinds of attempts to sabotage my work. But the people who study me, who read my books, who follow my shows, know that every week here you will find something different. Something different. And I want to say hello also to all my Jewish friends, especially from the Orthodox communities, who thanked me for this book because they said, we have really saw these problems with our own eyes. The ultra-Orthodox world might be scared of showing certain problems, certain connection with the Sabbatian Frankists, especially within the Hasidism. I mean, the Sabbatian Frankists, of course, are connected with Hasidism, but not all of Hasidism or the Hasidic Jews are emanating from what Baal Shem Tov. Because Baal Shem Tov apparently died because of the suffering felt because of the Sabbatian Frankists. Yes, Baal Shem Tov, the Jewish mystic and healer, who is regarded as the founder of Hasidic Judaism, apparently died of a broken heart. And that heart was broken because of an heresy that today everybody wants to ignore. Please share this video on your social networks of choice. Share it with your Jewish friends, with your Jewish families, with other Orthodox Jews, with Reformed Jews, with revisionists, with all kinds of Jews, because the Jews are the first victims of the Sabbatian Frankist heresy, as I pointed out in my book. Guys, we will see each other next week. And if you want to support us, you can do it through your donations at GoFundMe. and Cash App. You can find the handle with my latest articles at leozegami.com, or you can purchase my books, which is a great way of supporting me. And if your support grows, we will also offer you more than one show a week. See you soon.
Illuminati want my mind, soul, and my body. Secret society, trying to keep it on.
When you are put in war, has a responsibility to report its purpose, how the war's progressing to 8 members of Congress in a confidential setting, okay? And this is the father of 4 daughters.
now to Paris.
So how exactly, man in the Orthodox Hasidic community, and he was the overseer of Chabad, which is an Indian